All right, let's dive into one of the most explosive moments in all of literary history, the Elizabethan stage. And trust me, this was so much more than just guys in tights speaking fancy language. This was a full-blown revolution in how we tell stories about ourselves.
I mean, really think about it. For centuries, drama was pretty much all about one thing, illustrating the word of God. And then almost overnight, it seems, the stage is just flooded with ambitious kings, lovesick teenagers, and ghosts demanding vengeance. So what on earth happened? How did we go from saints to Shakespeare?
Well, here's how we're going to figure it out. First, we'll look at the revolution on stage itself. Then we'll dig into the cultural spirit that was fueling the whole thing. We'll see how that new spirit changed everything, from comedy to tragedy. And finally, we'll see how it all came together in the work of one man, William Shakespeare.
Okay, so the first thing you have to understand is that Elizabethan drama wasn't just a new kind of show. Nope. It was the grand finale, the climactic expression of a huge cultural and intellectual movement that had been building for centuries, the Renaissance. And this is so important. This did not happen overnight. The Renaissance kicked off way back in the 14th century, and its ideas spread pretty slowly across Europe. By the time the 16th century rolled around, the English stage became this perfect powder keg for all these new ways of thinking to finally just explode into public view. You could say it was the true beginning of the modern age. So to really get these plays, we have to get the radical new ideas that were in the air. The entire spirit of the age had shifted. People were starting to see the world and their place in it in a completely new way.
And you can see the core of that shift right here. The medieval world, it was totally God-centered. The church was the middleman for everything, and art was supposed to show life as it ought to be. A clear moral lesson. The Renaissance just completely flipped that script. The world became man-centered. People wanted direct access to knowledge, and art started celebrating life as it is. The good, the bad, the messy, all of it.
Now, the engine driving this whole transformation was a philosophy called humanism. And it's a simple idea, but a profound one. The human experience is what matters most. For the first time in centuries, the camera of life wasn't pointed up at the heavens anymore. It was pointed right here at us, on the streets. And humanism wasn't acting alone, right? You had this whole cocktail of powerful ideas swirling together. Protestantism said you could have a direct line to God, no middleman needed. Rationalism pushed for reason over just blind faith. Secularism shifted the focus from the afterlife to this life. And people were rediscovering all these pre-Christian Greek and Roman classics, realizing there were other powerful ways to understand the world. All these currents just merged and created a totally new atmosphere. So how did this new spirit actually show up on stage? Let's start with comedy. Elizabethan comedy became this wild, vibrant celebration of real, complex, everyday human life. The spotlight moved from telling stories about perfect saints to telling stories about, well, everybody else. You gotta remember, before this, plays were basically church sermons brought to life. They were these very straightforward illustrations of Bible stories or tales about the lives of saints, all designed to be simple moral models. The characters weren't really people, they were symbols. But Elizabethan comedy, it just threw all of that right out the window. Suddenly, the stage was a mirror of the real world. Yeah, you had kings and queens, but you also had servants and workers and peasants. It was this rich, chaotic mix of high and low, good and evil, a total celebration of life as it was actually being lived. The first playwrights to really tackle this were a group of super-educated guys known as the University Wits. Thinkers like John Lyly and Robert Greene. They were known for being really clever and intellectual, but their plays could be a bit bookish. They were more focused on following the classical rules of drama they'd studied at university. And this is where the big difference really shows up. You have the university wits, with all their fancy degrees, writing these very rule-oriented comedies. And then along comes Shakespeare. With basically a high school education, he just didn't seem to care about the rulebook. His source material was life itself. And here's the great irony. His lack of a university education was actually his biggest advantage. It kept him grounded in the real world, not the world of old books. Now, if comedy explored the sunny side of this new human-focused world, tragedy stared right into its dark side. This is where we get into the heavy stuff, the treachery, the ambition, the revenge, all the painful parts of life that make us weep instead of laugh. And you can't talk about tragedy before Shakespeare without talking about Christopher Marlowe. He was another one of those brilliant university wits, and his most famous play, Dr. Faustus, is all about a man so ambitious he literally sells his soul to the devil for knowledge and power. You kind of get the feeling that theme mirrored Marlowe's own burning ambition. But Marlowe's own story ended in tragedy. He was killed in a tavern brawl at just 29 years old. It was a shocking death that cut a brilliant career way too short, and it left the stage wide open for his great rival, Shakespeare, to step in and become the undisputed master. And Shakespeare would go on to write some incredible tragedies, but his genius is at its most powerful in 4 absolute masterpieces. Pretty much everyone agrees that Hamlet, Othello, King Lear, and Macbeth represent the absolute peak of his art. They're like the Mount Rushmore of English tragedy. Just take Hamlet. It's a complete psychological pressure cooker. After his uncle murders his father and marries his mother, Hamlet's dad's ghost shows up and demands revenge. What happens next is this deep dive into feigned madness and real grief, where the quest for vengeance ends up destroying not just the villain, but absolutely everyone, including Hamlet himself. It's dark, it's messy, and it is profoundly human. So this brings us to our final act, trying to understand Shakespeare's unique place in this whole revolution. See, he wasn't great because of what he learned in a classroom. He was great because he was a true genius of nature. So here's the crucial point. While the university wits had all this knowledge from books, Shakespeare had what people at the time called a nature's gift, just this innate, raw genius for observing human life. He held a mirror up to the world and put what he saw on stage with a kind of realism and psychological depth that nobody had ever even come close to before. In the end, Elizabethan drama, and especially Shakespeare, really was the ultimate culmination of the Renaissance. All those revolutionary ideas about humanism and reason and seeing life as it really is, they found their most powerful and lasting voice right there on that stage. Which leaves us with a final thought to chew on. 400 years ago, these plays explored the human condition through big themes like ambition, love, betrayal, and revenge. So, if a modern Shakespeare were to hold a mirror up to our world today, what virtues, what vices, and what timeless truths would we see?